The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power and advanced Audi tech. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Get the Angel Reese special at McDonald's now. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. Sound good? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
Hi, this is Simon Bown. For years I've explored the mysteries of near-death experiences, reincarnation, and life beyond this one. Now I've gathered some of the most compelling cases into my new book, Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife. This book features 30 extraordinary near-death experiences, each one backed by verifiable details that defy explanation. These are more than just personal stories. They offer real evidence that consciousness continues beyond death. Through these accounts, you'll hear about profound moments of connection, insights from beyond, and experiences that challenge everything we think we know about life and the afterlife. Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife, will be published on March 24th, and the Kindle version is now available for pre-order. Welcome to Our Paranormal Afterlife. This is Our Paranormal Afterlife, and I'm your host, Simon Bown. And if you want to enjoy the extended version of this episode ad-free, along with over 100 hours of extended episodes, please listen on Patreon. This week I'm talking to Lilan Laishley about her book, Past Lives and Present Purpose, Reincarnation and the Illumination of Your Soul. Lilan has a PhD in religious studies with a concentration on symbol, ritual and cosmology. As a university professor, she has travelled the world investigating sacred sites, teaching religion, and presenting papers at academic conferences. She has a master's degree in counselling with a focus on Jungian psychology and past life therapy, and she is a founding member and former director of research for the Labyrinth Society. She is also a consulting and teaching astrologer for 40 years. Hi Lilan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So we're going to talk about your book. It's called Past Lives and Present Purpose, Reincarnation and the Illumination of Your Soul. But before we start talking about it, could you tell us about your background and your spiritual path?
Well, sure. I was born, I think, as a spiritual being. As a child, I actually had astral experiences, where I would see beings walking through the house or down the street that didn't really exist. And I had some out of body experiences. So I was very, I guess you'd say, tuned in as a child. And I was very spiritually oriented. And I remember my dad, it must have been obvious because my dad would always say to me, "Wake up, Alice, Wonderland's not just around the corner." He was trying to make me more practical. So, and I remember as a kid, I used to walk around my neighborhood thinking, when I come back, do I want to be a bird or a tree? And that fascinated me because birds had such freedom and trees were rooted and were where birds were safe. And so I was thinking about reincarnation as a child and I knew nothing about it. So we did have a little bit of, as a kid, I played with the Ouija board. And my mom warned me that would allow spirits to enter. But, and then I went on and got my education and I got a bachelor's degree. And then I went to New York City and got a master's degree. And that's when I got turned on to past life therapy. I had read Morris Netherton's book, Past Life Therapy, and was fascinated with it. And in my master's degree, we had to do an internship in something, where we took something as our special project. And most people were doing alcoholism or aging. And I said, "Can I do past life therapy?" And they actually said yes. So I flew to California and did training with Dr. Netherton and saw clients. And I found a past life therapist in New York that I went to. And I did all this work on, past life. And it was funny when the teachers would ask a question like, well, why is this person an alcoholic? Everybody would refer, and I would always go, well, maybe in another life. So, I ended up, getting certified as a past life therapist in 1982 and pretty much went full time in past life therapy. And it's such powerful work. And it was really therapeutic in that I also had a license. I was a licensed counselor too, and I had a master's in counseling. So people would come to me with issues, and I would ask them to describe them and then use the language they used. Like if they said, I feel buried in my work, or I can't move in this, relationship, I would pick up that language, being buried, can't move, and would use that back to them. And then they would move into through a type of hypnosis, they would move into a past life where they were buried and couldn't move. And it was like healing old soul wounds to release people to be free in this life. It was powerful, powerful work. And I loved it. And because I found out that so many past lives affected people's current lives in many different ways. I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and I worked in alcoholism, and then I went on to get a PhD so I could understand the spiritual significance of all of this, and realizing that the soul speaks in symbolic language through dreams and imagery. And so I actually did a lot of work on the tarot and Carl Jung's concepts, and the soul speaks through its past lives, and it affects this one. So it was amazing. Yeah, I pretty much dived in.
So at the beginning, you say this book is written mostly by me, Lilan's soul.
Yes.
So is it kind of channeling or something else?
Well, I don't think of myself as a channeler, to be honest. It's more like, I don't know if you've heard of the event called NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. It's in November. And I think anybody can sign up, and you promise to write like 50,000 words a day or something. So it's got this container to get you to write. And that's when I wrote the book, was in this sort of pressured container. And my soul wrote the stories. My soul wrote the book. I learned so much in the book, honestly, about reincarnation. And I think of myself as the editor. I edited it. But I don't think of myself as a channel. It's more like if you woke up and had a dream and wrote your dream down, I don't think you would consider that channeling. It was more like that. It's more like my soul just wrote it, because I wasn't in Egypt or Atlantis or, those places. So no, I really do feel like my soul wrote the book.
When I was reading the chapter with Atlantis, it seems like there's so much detail there with words and with the names of people and everything that happened there.
Yeah. And my Atlantis lifetime, actually, when I was training to be a past life therapist, we had to go through a lot of therapy, and it was in that training that Atlantis first showed up for me. And it was such a powerful life. And, I did 2 sessions on it, which is usually you can clear a past life in 1 session, because it was so powerful. And I had never given Atlantis any thought. It's not like I was, a big Atlantis believer. So I was really surprised to find out. But that one came up actually in a past life session. Yeah. Some of them came up in dreams. The one about the priest came out in a dream. But yeah, no, it's, and that's what I'm saying. My soul wrote it. And that's how come I think it's so detailed.
Did you work out how that life in Atlantis is related to your current life and what might be coming through from it that's helping you now, or maybe not helping you?
Well, that was my first lifetime, and it brings up the issue of where do we originally come from? You know what I mean? Are we from other dimensions? Other, where does the soul originate? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you do. Do you have any ideas?
I've heard so many ideas about that on the podcast from all these different guests.
Yeah, it's a good inquiry. But I think most of my issues started in that life, and actually in my book I list them. And one of them is, not to trust authority, lay low, be careful who you hang out with, be careful who you believe. And I felt so much guilt that I was responsible in some way for the destruction of Atlantis. And but I'm slowly, I'm working through that. I don't feel that guilt anymore. And actually writing the story out, I got an insight on it that I hadn't gotten before, that it really wasn't my fault. I did everything I could to stop it.
So you think things have come through from that life that have helped you in this life?
I think the things that have helped me in this life is that I came in as a spiritual energy source, and tuning into the energy of things. I still do that. And the breathing, I mentioned at the end of it how the control of the breath was so important. And, so how to control energy and how to tap into spiritual sources, that was positive. The whole sense of being isolated and separated and used basically as a tool in somebody else's scheme, that was a negative.
One of the things I found interesting there was you say that after you died in that life and you went into the spiritual world, you almost ended up in like a hospital emergency room.
Yeah. That's because it was such a dramatic death. I mean, they literally cut my heart out, and in the training I did, we just worked with past lives. We didn't do any in-between life work. But I became aware that there was a whole thing of between life work. And I ended up doing some training in that, actually about 4 or 5 years ago, to that place. Where do you go after you die and before you're reborn? And who's there for you? Or do you have a group of people that you meet up with, or are you getting healed from your wounds? There's all kinds of speculation about what goes on in the between lives. And so, though I didn't think of it at the time, that's probably what it was like, is that in a between life, I was so damaged by the death and destruction that happened in Atlantis that, I probably needed some some serious help before I came back down again.
The Atlantis you described sounds very, I don't know if spiritual is the right word, but there's a lot of psychic stuff going on there, and it's like everybody accepted it.
Yeah, well, Plato's the first person who wrote about Atlantis. And I'm a big fan of Plato for a lot of reasons, and he believed in reincarnation. He actually believed that you could come back as animals, so which I'm not sure about that. But so Plato wrote about Atlantis in 2 of his different dialogues, and the map I have in the book is from sort of Plato's map, and so I think that it was a spiritual existence. I mean, I even say in the book, it felt like sort of like, and I said like a group of beings came to Earth to raise the consciousness and the level of existence of Earthlings, which at that point we were probably pretty cave dwellers. I don't know exactly what the timing was, but to raise the consciousness. There's a whole lot of theory that we were integrated with that Earthlings, humans, were integrated with a higher level of consciousness beings, so to raise our consciousness. And it feels like that I was part of that contingency. I came there to help Earth raise up in its level of awareness.
We're talking about the soul here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a definition of what the soul is?
Yeah, the soul to me is the immortal essence of who we are. And it exists outside of time and space. It exists in multiple dimensions. And I think that as humans, we're a combination of spirit, soul, mind, and body, like fire, earth, air, water. And the soul is the essence of who we are. So I am not a body with a soul. I'm a soul that has this current body. So it's like more, I think one of the big things you get in looking at past lives and stuff is to create more identification with your soul, which is in this present body right now, rather than thinking that you're a body that has this butterfly soul or something. And so the soul is the immortal part of who we are. And when we die, our body dies. And I think our mind quits existing. But our soul and our spirit continue. And then the soul is reborn in another body, like getting a new car, and then has another experience. But the soul has continuity and remembers lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And that memory of the soul, I think, exists in the unconscious mind. The logical mind, the left brain, is where we do analysis and judgment and such like that. And the right brain is the unconscious brain. And that's where the soul keeps its memories. So when the soul moves into a new body, it downloads those memories into the unconscious. So I think anybody who does a lot of work with their unconscious through paying attention to dreams or meditating or, spiritual dance or ritual connects to the unconscious mind and can connect to their soul. Yeah. So the soul has its own essence. Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that the soul doesn't put its entire self into each life, but just a part of itself, like a small percentage?
I've never thought about that, but I think it could do whatever it wants. Now, I know that some people think that souls can split between different beings, so that one soul can be in two beings at the same time. So that's not something I've ever experienced. But there's a woman named Linda Backman who does the Between Life training, and she talks about that some souls come from outer space and some souls are earthbound, and that you can have two people existing that they share the same soul. Now, that doesn't resonate with me personally, but it could just be because I've never experienced that. I think of the soul as a complete entity, a complete essence. But I would imagine it could split and just, get part of it.
Do you feel that our souls try and communicate with us often, but the way they communicate is so subtle that we don't spot it all the time? There's this little clues coming from them.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and that's one of the advantages of understanding your unconscious and I love symbolism. Okay. Because I think the soul speaks through symbols, and where the mind speaks through language. And so, I do shamanic journeying and I pay attention to my dreams, and I must have 50 oracle decks. I did my master's degree on the tarot. So I love symbolic systems. And I think you can talk to your soul through those things, like why am I so sad today? And then you pull a card from your deck. And that's one way to connect. Through dreams, absolutely. I've worked with people who have had entire past life stories in a dream. Or they'll dream the same theme over and over again. So yes, I think the soul tries to connect to us. And the more you pay attention, either by writing your dreams down or using oracle cards or meditating or whatever system you want to use, the more connection you have with your soul. Absolutely. I think you can create a major dialogue with it. That's what I've done.
Do you think there'll be times when your soul will want you to see a past life, and so in some way they might be unconsciously nudging you to do a past life regression.
Yes, absolutely. I think that can be happening, or you could get images in dreams. And I don't know if anybody does the shamanic journeying, but you could actually say, I would like to journey to a past life to see what's going on with my relationship right now, and you could, it's like active imagination, what Carl Jung would call active imagination. You're not you're not asleep like a dream is, but you're imagining something. And so, yeah, I think the soul wants you to pay attention to it. Absolutely. And just a small example, but in the shamanic work I do, hawk is my power animal. And so if I see a hawk flying or lands near me or screeches, I think that my soul is trying to tell me something. So I'll actually look up at the hawk and say, what's the message? So I think that once you connect to your soul, it's everywhere.
Do you ever come across spirit guides?
I'm not, and interestingly enough, I'm not a big spirit guide person. I don't do channeling. I don't do spirit guides in the sense that I think my hawk would be considered a spirit guide. But as far as me having a real image of a spirit guide, like some people connect to spirit guides and have conversations with them and can see other people's spirit guides and, that type of thing. I can't do that. So I wouldn't say I do much with like either channeling or spirit guides. Yeah. If that's what you mean by spirit guide.
Yeah, I suppose so. There's that idea that we all have a spirit guide, maybe one or two that were with us our whole lives, and then others will come and go as needed.
I think that's true. And for me, it doesn't tend to be a being as much as like hawk, if I see a hawk, to me, that would be like a message from my spirit guide.
This is something that happens to me, I'm sure. It's like you see something, you think that's a sign. But at the same time, you think, but what does it mean? What are they trying to tell me?
Well, and that's the thing. No, absolutely. Signs and synchronicities are a great way that soul talks to us and spirit talks to us. I think soul is connected to spirit, the divinity of all things, the sacred of all things. So if you have a connection with your soul, you have a better connection with spirit. And so the synchronicity, like you're thinking of an old friend you haven't seen in years, and then suddenly she sends you an email. It's like, that's interesting. Or you run into an old boyfriend that you were wondering what he was up to, or, whatever it is. That's Carl Jung's, one of his concepts is it's more than a coincidence. It's like the universe is putting those two things together. So no, I agree. Signs and synchronicities. And if I saw something and didn't know what it meant and I was curious, I would probably use one of my oracle decks or the runes or, something like that and say, what was the message of that? And pull a card and see if that resonated. Or the I Ching. I love all those I love all those things. If it's a symbol system, I'm all in.
And do you have any thoughts on this thing where numbers might have something to do with it? I'm always seeing numbers that double up.
Yes, I think, I'm sorry. In what way do you see the numbers that double up, for example?
Well, I might glance at my phone and it's 1414, and then I look down and next to me there's a bill and it's for 5252, and then I pause Netflix and it pauses at 3535, and it happens all the time.
Yeah, I would say those are messages for you. I don't know what they would be. Now, numerology is a whole thing where the numbers have meaning. So you could play around with the idea of, if it says, 1414, you could add 1 and 4 is 5 and 1 is 6 and 4 is 10, and 10 has a meaning, and then it reduces, that sort of thing. You could play around with it and see if you get any messages that way. I don't know if you've ever looked into numerology. It's pretty interesting.
Oh, I haven't. I'll have to have a look at that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to discuss another concept in your book. You say there are allies in your current life who are here to help you. but there are
Yes.
also adversaries. But is it that thing where when they're not incarnate, they're in your soul group and actually your adversaries are there to help you?
I think mostly adversaries are not here to help. I think, I believe that, and a lot of people believe that we have soul pods, and that would be part of that whole between life stuff. Okay, that in between lives, you go to your soul pod and you all hang out and, chat about what that last life was like. And, oh my God, what did I learn? And, how am I wounded? And some of those people become our allies. And I mentioned like my brother when I was growing up and my family thought I was pretty weird. My brother felt like a real ally. He supported me. And I remember I was interested in astral travel, but I knew I couldn't mention that in my house. They would think I was crazy. And then at dinner one night, my brother starts talking about astral travel. And it just blew my mind. So I think we do have people in our lives who are allies, and they pop up in different lifetimes. And I mentioned some of those in my book, but I also think we have adversaries, people who try to stop us. And I mentioned them too. You want to be aware of who your allies are and who your adversaries are. And that's another good reason to do past life work and, is to find out who those people are. Even though you might very well know who some of those people are. You might have an ex-wife who's just a horrible being. And just, she might have been an adversary that you've worked with before.
Because I've heard that with the soul groups, before you're born, you might all get together and decide how they're going to help you with your life. And if perhaps your next life you want to work on rejection and what it feels like to be rejected, somebody's in your soul group will say, okay, I'll be in your life and I'll reject you. And that helps them with learning that lesson.
Correct. Now, in that case, somebody's doing it to help you, not to hurt you. And so that would be more of an ally. Yeah, absolutely.
You said in the book there's the tale of your grandmother who saw her brother who was away at war. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, it's funny because people, I grew up in a Christian, a lot of my family was Catholic and we went to church every Sunday and, a lot of this stuff wasn't discussed. But I did hear stories from time to time. And one of them was that one about my grandmother said that she was, in the kitchen and she saw her brother walk through and, he was away at war. And so she understood that he was saying goodbye to her. And then she found out soon after that he had been killed. And I told you my mother was very much against the Ouija board. I don't know if you know what a Ouija board is, but you ask questions and and she said that, and then there's another thing called table rocking. Some people would have table rocks. And she said a table chased her mother up the stairs. I didn't know what to think about that one, but so there was stories of sort of psychic, spiritual stuff, esoteric things, but not a lot, but enough to let me realize that there was discussion of energies that aren't ones that we typically think of hanging around the house. Yeah. And my mom did not like us playing with the Ouija board in the house. And we were just playing with it, but she thought it was a doorway for spirits to come in.
Yeah, I think when Ouija boards got very popular, I think it was maybe 100 years ago or so, that companies were selling it just like your family board game that you'd play.
Right. Right. And my mother said when she used to do Ouija boards, they would write out the letters on each separate piece of paper and then scramble the letters and then blindfold the people using the cursor or whatever. So there was no way somebody could spell out what they wanted to say. It was more definite. Spirit was moving moving it. But no, they would just They were like board games. You're right. But my mom had this memory of what it was like back when, and she didn't like them.
Oh, I wonder if she had an experience and she didn't tell you about it.
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. And I used to study with a very well-known astrologer who was a psychic, Isabel Hickey, and she would say that she would go to funerals and she could see the deceased person at the funeral. You know, she said people come to their own funerals, and so she would have conversations with the deceased at the funerals, and you know, find out like, were they angry at somebody, you know, or did they come because they loved somebody? So I thought about that too. I wonder if like souls show up to funerals, and I think that what ghosts are, which we don't hear much about ghosts these days, but back in my mom's day, you know, you heard about these things, or in my grandmother's day. But ghosts, I think, are souls that they're so attached to something that when the body dies, the soul stays, like an old house. You know, maybe they love that house so much that when the body died, the soul refused to leave. And so that's how you get this idea that homes are haunted.
Hello, this is me, Simon. Did you know that during a past life regression you can meet with your spirit guide? I conduct past life regression sessions over Zoom, and I've guided many clients to a spiritual encounter with their guide. If you would like to ask me how a session would work for you, you can book a free 20-minute consultation on my website, pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. The link is in the show notes. Yeah, I think these things are going on all around us all the time, and most of the time people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to seem weird.
I know. Yeah, well, that's kind of how I felt about publishing my book, is that people would think I was weird. Yeah.
In the book, you say sometimes a soul just needs a life off. Maybe after a rough lifetime in the 1400s as a warrior, a nice quiet life as a hermit might be what the soul needs.
Yes. Well, you know, there's a lot of people will refer to young souls and old souls. I don't know if people still, you know, oh, she's a young soul. In other words, she's clueless. Or he's an old soul. He's very wise. So, you know, and one of the things I say, it's every soul has a different trajectory. And it's not up to me to judge why somebody's not doing anything in this lifetime. You know, like I happen to know somebody who pretty much does absolutely nothing but play video games.
Yeah.
You know, but the sense I get is that their last life, they were a samurai warrior that got killed in battle, and that this lifetime, they don't want to do anything. You know what I mean? That they just need to rest. And I know I've had lifetimes where just working in the fields or harvesting herbs was plenty enough. So I don't think every lifetime has to be this dynamic piece. And the lives I wrote about in my book are the big ones. You know, I mean, I've had plenty of lifetimes where not much happened. I do think the soul just needs to rest, especially after, you know, a big lifetime.
Yeah, so it's not being lazy, it's part of the process.
Right. And that's part of understanding reincarnation, gives you more compassion, because when you see that somebody doesn't want to do anything, instead of being real judgmental, you can have some compassion and you can say, well, I don't know what their mission is in this lifetime. I don't know what they're here for. You know, maybe they're here to learn how to have deep sleeps and learn how to dream. And that's why they sleep 12 hours a day. I mean, you know, I can't judge how somebody's living their life.
I saw one of my past lives where I was in a pub, and it seemed like 300 or 400 years ago. And the impression I got from that life is that's all I did. I was behind the bar, and it was a quiet pub, and people would come in the evenings and have some ale, and that was it. That was the whole life. And it seemed like it was a bit of a waste, but maybe that was a restful one.
Yes, it is. And also it could be that what you needed to learn that life is how to interact with people. And so that's what you did the whole time, was just shoot the shit, and chat it up. And so that might have been the entire lesson of that lifetime. That's why it's important, I think, not to judge people, because we really don't know what they're here for or what they're here to do. Unless they, of course, an adversary, and then you're allowed to judge them. But yeah, no, you might have just been just calmly relaxing and learning what it's like to be part of a community. And that's it. And that's a huge lesson when you think about it.
Did you, when you were taking people through past life regression, were there any that seemed really weird to you, that stood out and thought, I don't know what's going on here? Because I could tell you about one that I did. There was a guy who went back to a past life where he was on another planet, and he was some kind of aquatic animal, like a dolphin or something. And the whole planet had these massive, I don't know if you call them whales, but they were psychic, and they joined up in a psychic web, and they would spread this positive energy around the planet. And that his job in that life was to look after one of these beings. And we got the impression that when he was in that life, he was in training to come to Earth. And when he got here, he would be putting out positive energy for Earth. So
yeah,
that was quite an outstanding one. It's not like you come across that very often.
No, you don't. And I don't know if I've ever come across an interplanetary life, but that doesn't mean I don't think that they happen. I mean, I don't think we're the only beings in this entire universe. That makes no sense. And I noticed from your information that you used to have a real interest in UFOs, and maybe you still do, but I think a lot of people probably came from other planets. I don't know, because I haven't personally experienced it, but that's actually kind of beautiful to think that there's these energetic forces that are here to help us. I like it.
Did you ever have a client that came back to you and said something like they tracked down the past life, they confirmed it was real?
I never did, but I'm certainly aware of, the research like Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker have done at the University of Virginia Medical. And I think that's fascinating that people have, done research and I also, my husband is a scholar of India. So I've been to India, and I know quite a few, things about India, and, they believe in reincarnation, and, millions and millions and millions, maybe even billions of people believe in reincarnation. So, I think it's just seems odd to some people, but no, I think that there are people that are here to help us, and there's things that we can't possibly understand. The only things I really understand are the things that I've experienced, and my clients were mostly dealing with like relational issues. I had one client come in that was all upset because the girl he had been dating for 2 months broke up with him, and he was devastated. He said, it's like my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt all got killed at the same time. And, that's like, hello, that probably happened. So we did a regression, and he saw that something like that did happen. And, that's why he was overreacting to this person leaving him. And then once we cleared that out, he was fine. So I think you have these old past life memories that get triggered. And that's another good reason to do the past life work.
Do you think what was happening to him there, this trigger, this connection with a past life, was something like it's a glitch in the system, or there was a reason why it was coming through?
I think there was a reason. I think that one of the best ways to tell if you are experiencing past life is called a trigger. You're triggered. And so, for example, when somebody you date for 2 months breaks off with you and you fall apart, that's a trigger. You overreacted to that situation. You see what I mean? That's the biggest highlight that can let you know that there's a past life going on. And so if you have a trigger, if you walk down the street in Amsterdam and suddenly see a house and you want to start crying, that would be a trigger. That would be something to say, okay, I need to explore this. And then that's what you would work with in your dreams or with a client, with a therapist or something. So triggers are the number one way I think that you can tell you're being triggered by a past life. You overreact to something.
I suppose triggers aren't always negative, are they? Because they affected him badly, and you were saying how you might want to start crying when you see a building. But there's got to be positive triggers as well.
Oh, absolutely. You could see somebody and think, that's the person for me. And it could be somebody that you knew in a past life. You could see somebody that you immediately want to hug and you've never seen them before. And it's like, well, that might be somebody in your soul pod, or it might be somebody you were married to. There can be positive ones too. You could walk by a field and see, sunflowers growing and just feel like, oh my gosh, that's the most gorgeous thing in the world. And then you find out that you used to sell, sunflowers on the Seine, and but no, there can be positive triggers too, any kind of trigger. But because I was doing therapy, most of the people would come in with challenging triggers.
So what's your view on this idea of soulmates and twin flames?
I don't think there's just one soulmate for somebody. Okay. And a twin flame, I think, would be almost like the soul split, and the two half souls meet again. I wouldn't go with that so much, but the soulmate, I think, it could be somebody that you were married to or loved in another lifetime, and you saw them again and you resonated to them. I don't think there's a single soulmate for people, though. I will say that. I think, like if you're waiting your whole life to find your soulmate, you could be passing up on a lot of really good opportunities. But if you see somebody that, oh my gosh, then it might be somebody you were with in another lifetime. So I think it's good but it could be a marriage partner. It could be a good friend. It could be a business partner. It could be somebody that you just really resonate to because you've had an experience with them before.
Yeah, it's just some connection. And it's also that thing where you might meet somebody and you have an instant dislike as well.
Correct. And then, yes, you have an instant dislike. And if you just tune in, especially once you start to think about all this stuff and engage in it and work with it, you can actually do a lot of tuning in for yourself. If you saw somebody at a meeting that you just couldn't stand, you could go home that evening and just say, okay, what's going on here? And close your eyes and go into a meditation. And, and for me, I've had, I've mentioned in the book that, I was engaged to be married and his mother hated me so much. The engagement ended because what she said is she didn't want him to get married because he had said he would always take care of her. Okay. So if he got married, she felt like I was taking away her protector. So she did everything she could to split us up, and we ended up splitting up. And so I definitely saw her as an adversary. But I didn't want to meet her in another lifetime or meet her again in this lifetime. So I did some energetic work and cleared any, bonds or links or coils between us so that that we weren't psychically connected. So you can do things like that as well. So if you met somebody that you had a horrible feeling about, you could go into sort of a meditation and see the energy between you all be cleared.
And if you're trying to clear it, is there kind of a symbolic way of doing it?
Well, you could also do it symbolically. What are you thinking? What do you have in mind?
Well, I know a technique where you would ask the client to imagine that they're a being of light and they can look down at themselves and they see dark patches amongst the light. And they can reach inside and bring all those dark patches out and throw them away. And it's kind of symbolic of removing this negative stuff.
Right. You could do the same thing in something like that. You could, have them look at somebody they didn't feel good about and do the exact same process. Yes, there's a lot of ways you can clear the energy, depending on the person's imagination and symbolic systems. what they believe. So, I mean, if it was somebody who was a strong Christian, you might want to ask it for an angel to come down and help out.
Yeah.
You can work with all kinds of different systems.
Do you think there's ever a time where somebody might be shown a past life or part of a past life that wasn't theirs, but your soul picks it out and thinks, if I show this, this will be really helpful?
In what way were they shown it? Like in a therapy session or in a dream, or what do you?
Yeah, it's in a past life regression, and then because I have this feeling maybe your soul guides and your soul, they know all of your past lives, but they're connected to everything else. They know all the other past lives, and they might know something that will really help you, but it's not one of yours.
I would imagine that could happen. I've never experienced it, either with myself or that I'm aware of with a client. But it would almost be like your soul is telling you a story, to help you understand something. Yeah. But did the client know that it wasn't their past life, that they knew they were just watching a story?
No, it's just an idea I've had. That, it's like having a client and they see a past life that person was alive at the same time they are alive now.
Yeah. Almost like they picked it up, like sort of psychically picked up somebody else's past life or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know about that. I've never experienced that. And I think it would get confusing not knowing if I was seeing my own energy or somebody else's. I guess for me, if I felt something like that was happening, because that's how what psychics do. They read people, and I would want to make sure that I knew the difference. That if I was seeing something that wasn't mine, that somehow something would, maybe a director would come out and say, let's start the show, or something, to give me a sense that this is more a lesson, but it's not mine. But I don't know. I've never experienced that.
With the 8 lives that you have in the book, did each one of them have a really powerful lesson, and that's why you chose it?
Right. Because it would be, well, I wanted to show how one life kind of can lead to another, how the karma that you create in one life shows up in the next, and the lessons that you learn show up in the next, and how our lifetimes are learning, they're teaching us. And so they needed to be lifetimes that, something was happening, But, for example, in the Egyptian lifetime, where I end up getting, trying to heal a princess and get in trouble for it, I'd say for the first 30 or 40 years of that lifetime, I did nothing but, pick herbs and create healings and, hang around the village and, help people out. Not much was going on. So that's how come I told each lifetime based on the story, the incident in the lifetime that was the most important. Otherwise, we'd have an encyclopedia, right? I mean, it'd be a little bit long. And then today I got up and walked the hills and collected herbs. And then I went to sleep and had it, So, yeah, so the lifetimes are more riveting, more important lifetimes. But I only told the important aspect of the lifetime too. So, because a lot of lifetimes are just very simple, like your experience at the bar,
So there's a thing with reincarnation that the common idea, I suppose, is that it's about enlightenment, and as you move forward through your lives, you clear up your karma, you become more enlightened, and eventually you get to a point you don't need to be born again. But one of the things in the book, as you say, the lessons I learned from these 8 lives is that the purpose of soul evolution through reincarnation isn't to become more spiritual, it's to become more human. So what did you mean by that?
I think basically I call us celestial humans. Okay, we're both spiritual beings and human beings. And I think our soul comes in. Our soul is a spiritual essence. In some ways it's already, aligned to spirit. And it comes in and figures out what it's like to be human, what it's like to love, what it's like to have fear, what it's like to work hard, what it's like to lose something, what it's like to be a human. And then as humans, we're learning what it's like to be connected to spirit, to be connected to the immortal, to be connected to the cosmos, So I think we are both physical and spiritual beings. And both of those parts are happening at once. And when the body dies, which it will, because it's a physical form, and the soul goes off, I think the soul holds a more of a spiritual light at that point, and even though it can be wounded, there's no question about that. So, one of the things I say is that, I kind of always wanted to be enlightened. If I worked hard enough on my spiritual growth, I could have enlightenment. And I knew there were enlightened people. I've met the Dalai Lama. I think he's enlightened. And he actually is a bodhisattva, somebody who's come back just to help the world. So I knew there were people who could do that, but it wasn't happening for me. And then I realized that, and that's one of the main things I got from the book, is that when the soul isn't really looking for enlightenment, because the reality is we're more like the moon than the sun. The sun is always bright, where the moon has phases. And so I'm thinking that, it's more like we have a dimmer switch. Sometimes we're entirely bright, and other times, like with a light switch, you can make it be just a little bit light, turn it off completely, make it really bright. That we have to appreciate how we are in all of our different phases. That sometimes we're totally clear and spiritually connected and fantastic, and other times we're feeling low because maybe somebody just died in the family, or we got sick. And that all of those phases are part of the learning experience. So I think the soul comes here to learn. I really do. I think the soul learns what it's like to be human, and through our connection with spirit and soul, we're learning what it's like to be spiritual, so that we are celestial humans. We are both spiritual and physical, and to appreciate both sides of that, instead of thinking, I just wish I was more spiritual. No, it's okay to have a dimmer switch. And I don't know if that makes sense, but to take the pressure off that we're supposed to be perfect all the time in some fashion. We're here to learn. And I think the soul is here to learn and gain in evolution and become wiser and more loving and more kind. And so, yeah, I just don't feel like the end result of all of this is to be completely enlightened, though, that's what a bodhisattva is. A bodhisattva is somebody who's, been on the wheel of death, life and death, the wheel of rebirth enough times that they, are completely enlightened, and they don't need to come back to learn anymore. And that's like what the Dalai Lama is. And so then he comes back. This is his 14th incarnation, to be here just to be of service. And I believe in bodhisattvas. I believe that some people have mastered the art of being a celestial human, and they're here just to be of service. So, yeah, I believe the bodhisattva. I believe the Dalai Lama is a bodhisattva. And that's a concept more in Buddhism and maybe Hinduism. I'm not sure.
The book is called Past Lives and Present Purpose, Reincarnation and the Illumination of Your Soul. And people can get that on Amazon, can't they?
Right, or at their local bookstore, however they want to do it. They'd have to order it at the bookstore. I don't think, that your bookstore is carrying it, but you can get it through your local bookstore.
Can you give us your website address?
Yes, it's www.Laishley.com, and Laishley's my last name, LAISHLEY.com. And and it's got, it's got information about astrology and labyrinths and different things. So it's a fun website.
Great.
And yeah. And now what's the name of your book that's coming out, you said?
Verified Near-Death Experiences.
Oh, I love it. And you said it's coming out next month or?
24th of March.
24th of March. Okay, good. Well, thank you so much, Simon. It's been a real pleasure to spend time with you.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on the podcast. This week I was talking to Lilan Laishley about her book, Past Lives and Present Purpose, Reincarnation and the Illumination of Your Soul. And if you want to hear the rest of this amazing interview, you can sign up to Patreon. When you sign up for $6 a month, you get an extended episode every week. For $3 a month, you get an extended episode every month. The Patreon episodes are ad-free and are released 2 days before the free versions. You can become a patron by going to patreon.com/Our Paranormal Afterlife, or click on the Patreon button on my homepage at pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. The links are in the show notes. And there is an Our Paranormal Afterlife Facebook group, and if you'd like to join, you'd be very welcome. And if you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or via your favourite podcast app to make sure that you don't miss out on any episodes. And thanks for listening.